The Republic had fallen and now the Empire had taken over. Where there was freedom, now there was turmoil. Where there was happiness, now there was dread. In this case, however, there were other places that abused the freedom given to them, at times even challenging the might and the power of Emperor Palpatine and his empire. Once that ultimate act was done, Palpatine would make sure you would suffer, and Vader was the one to bring the suffering. This was especially true about a billionaire and his son, operating frivolously without any morals or ethics, abusing their malnourished workers, and perhaps even insinuated that they worked for free basically. This was the only child of this billionaire who watched the caretaker torture and whip the workers for no reason, and still he wasn't satisfied. He approached the caretaker, pushed him out of the way, and grabbed the whip for himself. As his father put it, he was such a good boy. Beating one wasn't enough. He started whipping everyone he could reach, always trying to please his father, who was even more maddening than he was. All this billionaire wanted to do was tell him how proud his son made him, his tenacity and his cruelty. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The workers screaming in agony, running at each side, trying to escape the wrath of this putrid human, abusing his power and position. But a new time had come, and they learned that quite quickly. As their mining operation flourished without anyone's involvement, the Empire came, and they sent their main enforcer, Darth Vader, to renegotiate contracts. They were forced into making concessions to members of an Autolan-based company, and this entire operation was to be overseen by Darth Vader. The wealthy industrialist lazily put his head down, not having a choice, their counselor crunching the numbers, and his son clenching his fist, a scowl on his face, thinking of anger. The problem here, as per usual, is that these two wealthy industrialists, both the father and the son, did not know the true nature of Darth Vader, his sheer might and obedience to his master. The billionaire called Darth Vader a mindless thug who doesn't know the first thing about business. This wealthy but poor man did not know who was he amongst, that Darth Vader was a Dark Lord of the Sith, his intentions to fulfill the wishes of his master Darth Sidious. No matter of business would deter him from that goal. The man continued with berating Vader, thinking that he doesn't even know what it means to lose something as precious as a percentage point. This was all envy, feeling that this other company was now taking advantage of them fully, and the Empire aided them in their greed as one of them grinned uncontrollably, knowing that this was going to be a smooth ride for them. But now the son of the billionaire was done with this meeting. Furiously, he went to the other chamber, and as both of these wealthy parties were greeting one another and concluding business, Vader was watching on, seemingly uninterested in what was happening. It was the son that was now carrying a blaster behind him, approaching the co-conspirators, and his only crime, according to his father, was that he wanted honor. He pointed his blaster at them, preparing to fire and kill them for the dishonor that they had brought to his father, excluding the fact that Darth Vader is right beside them. But again, they were unfamiliar with Darth Vader's brutal tactics and aggressive negotiations. Without a moment's thought, Vader picked up his lightsaber, jumped before the businessmen, and deflected the blaster bolt with his lightsaber back at the billionaire's son, hitting him square in the chest and killing him instantly. No matter to Darth Vader, the negotiations were done, and the son dying was simply collateral damage. In the eyes of the Empire and Vader alike, he deserved it for interfering in the Empire's business. This billionaire father would not rest though, traveling to a completely different planet, wanting to hire an assassin that would take revenge his now dead son. He would pay whatever price necessary in order to kill Darth Vader, the ruthless assassin that killed his son. Once the business meeting was concluded, the father went on to have his own adventure together with the aforementioned assassin, but nevertheless, we do know that Vader had a personal issue with slavery, of course. Set aside the fact that he didn't even know these billionaires and he held out a grudge against them, it seems. He even confronted Palpatine at one point because the Empire was divulging in slavery. Slaves, he thought to himself. Even Commander Vil was still asking for Vader, and he was completely zoned out. He is reminded of little Annie, who wanted to come back to Tatooine and free all the slaves. There was definitely no sleep for Vader this night after he discovered that he was now part of a slave trade, a former slave himself. Indeed, Vader waited for the opportune moment to approach his master, who was sitting idly by on the docks overlooking his ships and troops. The Empire was going strong, so was the slave trade. When Vader approaches, Palpatine welcomes him, and he tells him that his new assignment would be forthcoming, but there is the matter of Morgana, which requires your attention. It involves a Jedi, says Palpatine, but Vader is still silent and looks the other way, being kind of dismissive to Palpatine at this moment. Guilt was eating him up inside. He was turbulent, visibly turbulent at that, moving his head, shifting his vision. And then suddenly it came. "Something troubles you, apprentice?" asked Palpatine, knowing full well that something troubled Vader. Now Vader was forthcoming. "I heard from Commander Vil," says Vader, "on New Plimto." "Ah," says Palpatine. Now he realized what his apprentice was on about. "I should have remembered Anakin Skywalker was a slave, as was his mother." This is indeed the first time that Palpatine, as the Emperor, as his new master, mentions his mother in front of Vader, who was trigger happy to say the least. Not only does he mention the name Anakin and that he was a slave, but he mentions his mother too. It is a very significant moment showing how low Vader had fallen. "My apologies, Lord Vader," says Palpatine. "I should have explained the current situation sooner." Vader couldn't do anything but stand idly by and listen to his master drone on and on about slavery, about how we can excuse it. But I mentioned earlier that he had fallen so low that if anybody else had the gall to mention his dead mother and that he, as Anakin, was a slave together with his mother, his head would be sliced clean off. You see the power dynamic in this comic very apparently, that Vader could do nothing but stand and listen to his new master. And that's exactly what Darth Sidious does. He explains that slavery exists in the lawless reaches of the Outer Rim. The trading of individual lives and freedom for personal gain must end, and it will in time. But what the Empire is doing on New Plimto and elsewhere is different. Palpatine concludes that it is a merciful alternative to what would otherwise be necessary, meaning that they would have to eradicate all of them. Vader, again, cannot reply in any way but shrug and listen. "I am certain," says Palpatine, "you understand." Slowly walks away from his apprentice, leaving him to think of his new life, of this never-ending war that is now creating more and more slaves, more and more little Annies and Skywalker. Thus the tragedy of Darth Vader. Even in these Legends comics, you can see how apparent it was, how apparent the power dynamic between these two, and very intentional with a lot of tense situations and tense conversations.